The chandelier hanging above the dining table had been commissioned from a glassblower in Prague who only worked for heads of state. 12,000 hand-cut crystals. It threw cold, surgical light across 12 women arranged around a mahogany table that could seat a corporate board. Each woman had been vetted with the thoroughness of a federal investigation, bloodlines traced back 3 generations, financial portfolios analyzed, social media scrubbed by a team Laura Cook personally supervised. She sat at the head in a black Chanel suit with military shoulders and a strand of South Sea pearls that never left her throat. Her posture was a declaration of war, spine rigid, chin elevated exactly 3 degrees, fingers steepled like a CEO about to announce layoffs. She'd spent 40 years learning how to freeze a room with her presence. Tonight she looked like she owned not just the table, but every breath taken around it. The 12 women were flawless. An heiress whose family name appeared on museum wings. A curator from the Met who moved through European aristocracy like silk through water. A venture capitalist who'd turned her father's shipping empire into a tech dynasty. A former ballerina turned fashion editor whose cheekbones had launched perfume campaigns. These weren't desperate social climbers. These were investments that had already matured, and Laura had arranged them like chess pieces. Dinner had been plated 38 minutes ago. Wagyu beef with black truffle reduction sat growing cold on Limoges china edged in platinum. Conversation drifted above the untouched plates, calculated, performative, sharp. Every woman executing a rehearsed version of elegance for a man who hadn't bothered to show. Eric Hirsch was 22 minutes late. Welcome to Dark Mafia Romance and Crime Stories. If this is your first time here, get comfortable, because our stories go all in, no filters. Make sure you hit subscribe, ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's get back to the story. The chandelier's crystals trembled from the force of Laura Cook's voice. Have you lost your mind? She was on her feet, both palms flat against the mahogany, leaning forward like a prosecutor closing in on a confession. This is a homeless woman. Look at her. She probably crawled out of some ditch on the property line. She collapsed at the north gate. Eric's voice came out flat, surgical. He hadn't moved from where he stood, one hand still extended toward Jennifer, who swayed in the doorway like she might shatter if someone breathed too hard. Security found her 20 minutes ago. Someone dumped her there. Then security should have called the police. Laura's pearls caught the light as she straightened, her face a mask of controlled fury. Not dragged her bleeding body through my home during the most important dinner of your home. Eric's eyes finally cut to his mother. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Funny, the deed has my name on it. One of the 12 women, the venture capitalist with the bone structure, made a soft, choking sound. Another reached for her wine glass with trembling fingers. The heiress whose family name lived on museum wings stared at Jennifer like she was watching a car accident in slow motion, unable to look away from the blood dripping onto the Italian marble. Laura's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath her expertly powdered skin. You're not serious. You can't possibly be. Dr. Reeves. Eric pulled his phone from his jacket pocket without breaking eye contact with his mother. I need you at the estate, North Wing, 3rd floor. Now. He paused, tilted his head slightly. Bring everything. Eric Michael Hirsch, if you think for 1 second that I'm going to allow, you're dismissed. The words landed like a slap. Laura's face went white, then red, then a shade of rage that had no name. Around the table, 12 perfectly postured women sat frozen, their practiced smiles long abandoned, watching a son dismantle his mother's authority with the efficiency of a hostile takeover. You will regret this, Laura whispered, venom dripping from every syllable. When you wake up tomorrow and realize what you've thrown away for some damaged piece of, get out. Laura's mouth opened, closed. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides, pearl-white knuckles against black Chanel. For a moment, she looked like she might actually strike him. Then she turned on her heel, grabbed her clutch from the sideboard, and walked toward the exit with the kind of fury that left scorch marks. She paused at the doorway, her back to the room. This isn't over. Yes, Eric said quietly. It is. The sound of Laura's heels echoed down the marble hallway like gunshots. Then silence. Heavy, suffocating silence broken only by Jennifer's ragged breathing and the quiet sob of the law professor whose father sat on 3 Fortune 500 boards. Eric moved. He crossed the distance between himself and Jennifer in 4 strides, his white Oxford shoes making no sound on the floor his mother had just abandoned. Up close, the damage was worse. A split lip, bruising around her throat in the shape of fingers. The scarring on her arms wasn't fresh. Some of it had healed months, maybe years ago. But the gash across her collarbone was still bleeding through the torn red fabric of her dress. Can you walk? His voice came out softer than he intended. Jennifer's eyes lifted to his. They were dark, feral, filled with the kind of terror that came from being hunted. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her knees buckled. Eric caught her before she hit the ground. The blood soaked into his white suit jacket immediately, a spreading stain across his shoulder, down his sleeve, across the pristine fabric he'd had tailored in Milan 3 weeks ago. He felt it, warm and wet, seeping through to his shirt. Behind him, someone gasped. Another woman whispered something that sounded like a prayer. He didn't care. Eric adjusted his grip, one arm beneath Jennifer's knees, the other supporting her shoulders, and lifted. She weighed almost nothing. Her head lolled against his chest, dark hair falling across his ruined lapel, and for a moment he felt her breath, shallow, desperate, against his throat. "The dinner is over," he said without turning around. "Someone will call your drivers." Then Eric Hirsch, pristine in everything but the blood painting his suit red, carried a broken woman up the stairs, while 12 flawless brides sat abandoned at his mother's table. Jennifer woke to the smell of lavender and the certainty that she was about to die. Her eyes snapped open. White ceiling, crown molding, a chandelier smaller than the one downstairs but still worth more than any apartment she'd ever lived in. Silk sheets against her skin. When was the last time she'd felt silk? The pillow under her head was down, real down, the kind that cost $400 and came with a certificate of authenticity. She tried to sit up. Pain exploded across her ribs. "Don't." The voice came from somewhere to her left. Male, low. The kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to make people obey. "You have 3 cracked ribs and a concussion. Dr. Reeves sedated you 4 hours ago. The stitches on your collarbone will tear if you move too quickly." Jennifer's head turned toward the sound. He was sitting in a leather wingback chair near the window, backlit by early morning sun that made his white shirt look almost phosphorescent. No jacket, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The first 2 buttons undone. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Where?" Her voice cracked. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed glass. "My house." Eric leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "3rd floor, north wing. You're in one of the guest suites. There are guards outside the door, but they're facing out, not in. You're not a prisoner." The word prisoner made her flinch. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Men like him noticed everything. The way prey notices predators, the way predators notice weakness. "Who are you?" She managed to push herself up against the headboard, despite the pain screaming through her torso. Fight or flight, always flight. Figure out the exits, count the steps to the door, calculate whether she could make it to the window before. "Eric Hirsch," he said it like she should know the name. Maybe she should. "You collapsed at my gate last night. Do you remember?" Fragments, running, headlights, gravel tearing her feet, the taste of copper in her mouth, voices behind her getting closer, always closer. Then iron bars, cold metal, her hands gripping something solid while her vision tunneled and, "They were chasing me." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I wasn't trying to break in, I just needed somewhere to." Her breath hitched. "Are they gone? Did they follow me here? Did you see?" "Stop." Eric's hand came up, palm out, not aggressive, almost gentle. "Breathe. No one followed you. My security would have handled it." Handled it. The phrase sat heavy in the air between them. Jennifer's fingers twisted in the silk sheets, her knuckles white. Handled it, like the men who'd given her these scars had handled things. Like the people who'd sold her had handled her. Like every man who'd ever promised protection right before. "I need to leave." She threw the covers back. Her legs were bare beneath a white cotton nightgown she definitely hadn't been wearing when she'd collapsed. Someone had undressed her. Someone had touched her while she was unconscious. Panic clawed up her throat. "I need to... Where are my clothes? Where's my... Your dress is evidence." Eric stood, but he didn't move closer. "Dr. Reeves photographed your injuries. Documented everything. If you want to press charges." "No." The word came out sharp, feral. "No police. No hospitals. No." She tried to stand. Her legs gave out immediately. The room tilted. Eric caught her before she hit the floor for the second time in 12 hours. This time she fought him. Fists against his chest, nails scraping for his face, a wounded animal sound tearing from her throat. He held her wrists, not hot enough to bruise, but firm enough to stop her from doing damage, and let her thrash until the adrenaline burned out and she collapsed against him, sobbing. "I can't go back," she whispered into his shirt. "Please. Whatever you want, I can't go back there." Eric's grip on her wrists loosened. Slowly, carefully, like she was made of glass and wire, he guided her back to the bed. This time he didn't sit in the chair. He crouched beside the mattress, eye level, close enough that she could see the gray threading through his dark hair at his temples, the exhaustion carved into the lines around his mouth. "What's your name?" She stared at him. It was such a simple question. Such a normal question. No one had asked her name in months. She'd been girl and bitch and that one, and a dozen other things that stripped her down to meat and desperation. Jennifer. Her voice came out small, broken. Jennifer Clayson. Jennifer. He repeated it like he was committing it to memory. Who did this to you? The scars on her arms seemed to burn under his gaze. Old wounds and new ones. A roadmap of violence written into her skin. She could tell him. She could say the names, describe the faces, point him toward the warehouse on the east side where they kept the others. She could give him everything. Or she could lie. Disappear. Run again the moment his back was turned. Jennifer looked at Eric Hirsch, this man in his blood-stained white shirt who'd carried her up the stairs, who'd dismissed his own mother, who sat watching her now with eyes that were cold and calculating but not cruel, and made a choice. I don't know their names, she whispered, but I can show you their faces. Something flickered across Eric's expression. Not quite a smile. Something darker, more dangerous. Good, he said quietly. That's a start. The click of heels on marble gave Jennifer exactly 3 seconds of warning. She was sitting up in bed, managing to keep down the broth Eric's housekeeper had brought an hour ago, when the door opened without a knock. No guard's warning, no polite inquiry, just the door swinging wide, and Laura Cook stepping through like she owned not just the room but the air inside it. She did, Jennifer realized with sinking dread. She owned all of it. So you're awake. Laura closed the door behind her with a soft click that sounded like a prison lock engaging. She was dressed in dove gray today. Armani, probably, with those same South Sea pearls and shoes that cost more than Jennifer had earned in the best year of her life. Good. This won't take long. Jennifer's fingers curled into the sheets. Every instinct screamed run, but there was nowhere to go. The window was 3 stories up, the door was blocked, and her ribs were still screaming every time she breathed too deeply. Eric said. She hated how small her voice sounded. Hated the tremor in it. My son says a great many things when he's trying to prove a point. Laura moved deeper into the room with the confidence of a woman who'd never been told no in her entire life. She didn't sit. Didn't touch anything. Just stood at the foot of the bed like a judge pronouncing sentence. Right now, that point is you. A rebellious middle finger to 40 years of work I've put into this family. I didn't ask to be here. No. Laura's smile was knife-thin. You just happened to collapse at our gate during the most important dinner of Eric's life. Quite the coincidence. Jennifer felt ice slide down her spine. You think I was running. I was bleeding. I didn't even know whose. I don't care. The words cut through Jennifer's protest like a scalpel. I don't care if you're a victim or a con artist, or some desperate nobody who got lucky. What I care about is that you are currently residing in my home, eating my food, sleeping in sheets I purchased, and wasting my son's time when he should be focused on salvaging the disaster you created. The disaster I created. Jennifer's voice rose, despite the fear clawing at her throat. I didn't force him to. You're right. You didn't force him. Laura took a step closer. Her perfume, something French and expensive, cut through the lavender scent of the room. You simply existed at precisely the right moment to trigger his pathological need to rescue broken things. It's a weakness his father had too. Got him killed, actually. Tried to save a business partner who was embezzling from us. The partner shot him in the head, rather than face prosecution. The casual way she said it, shot him in the head, made Jennifer's blood run cold. Eric learned that lesson young, Laura continued. Or so I thought, apparently not young enough. Because here you are, playing the role of damsel so convincingly that my son has thrown away a year of careful negotiations, insulted a dozen powerful families, and made himself look weak in front of people who will use that weakness to destroy everything I've built. Then let me leave. Jennifer heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it. I don't want to be here. I never wanted. Oh, you'll leave. Laura's smile widened, and there was nothing human in it. The question is whether you leave with a suitcase and a wire transfer, or whether you leave the way you arrived. Bleeding. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Jennifer's heart hammered against her cracked ribs. She'd heard threats before, hundreds of them, whispered and screamed and delivered with fists and belt buckles. But this was different. This was clinical. A businesswoman discussing the removal of a problematic asset. Eric won't let you. Eric is meeting with our attorneys about the Castellano merger. He'll be gone for at least 3 hours. Laura checked her watch. Cartier. Jennifer noticed numbly, with the casual precision of someone who'd orchestrated this timing perfectly. More than enough time for you to realize that staying here is the most dangerous decision you could possibly make. She moved to the door, placed her hand on the knob, then paused. Looked back over her shoulder. Eric found her halfway down the servants' staircase at 2 in the morning, barefoot and bleeding through her bandages. She'd made it 4 flights before her ribs gave out. He watched from the landing above as she collapsed against the wall, one hand pressed to her side, the other gripping the railing like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her breath came in sharp, desperate gasps that echoed in the narrow stairwell. "You won't make it to the ground floor." His voice cut through the darkness. Jennifer's head snapped up. Even in the dim emergency lighting, he could see the animal fear in her eyes. The same look she'd had when she'd woken up fighting him. She tried to push herself upright, to run, but her legs buckled. "Don't." Eric descended the stairs slowly, hands visible, the way you'd approach something wounded and cornered. "You're tearing your stitches. Dr. Reeves will have my head if I let you bleed out in the stairwell. Let me go." Her voice was raw. "Please. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. Just let me go." He stopped 3 steps above her, close enough to catch her if she fell, far enough that she didn't feel trapped. "My mother came to see you." It wasn't a question. Jennifer's expression was answer enough, the flicker of terror, quickly suppressed, replaced by something harder. Defiant. She made her position very clear. "I'm sure she did." Eric sat down on the step, ignoring the way his $1,000 slacks touched the dusty floor. "What did she offer you? Money? A car? A one-way ticket to somewhere I'd never find you?" Jennifer stared at him. "Does it matter?" "Yes." He leaned back against the wall, mirroring her posture, letting his body language say, "I'm not a threat." Because if you're running from her threats, that's one thing. If you're running from me, that's another. "I'm running from all of it." She pressed harder against her ribs. Blood was seeping through the white nightgown now, a dark stain spreading across her side. "This house, your mother, you. Whatever game you're playing by keeping me here." "No game." Eric's voice went flat, cold. "My mother operates in games. Strategies, political maneuvering. I operate in facts. And the facts are, someone hurt you, dumped you at my gate, and you're terrified enough to attempt a 3-story escape on cracked ribs, rather than wait until morning and walk out the front door." "You wouldn't have let me walk out." "No," he admitted. "I wouldn't have. Not until I understood what I was looking at." Jennifer laughed, a broken sound that turned into a wince. "You're looking at damaged goods. Your mother said it. Those women at your dinner thought it. Even your doctor." I saw the way he looked at me, like I was something contaminated he had to handle with gloves. "Dr. Reeves wears gloves for everyone. It's called hygiene." Eric stood, moved down to her step. This time, she didn't flinch away. "Come back upstairs. Let me look at the damage. Then, if you still want to leave, I'll drive you myself." She studied his face for a long moment, looking for the lie, the trap, the moment where his mask would slip, and she'd see the same thing she'd seen in every other man who'd promised help. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why do you care?" "Because you're bleeding on my staircase and you still haven't told me who did this to you." He extended his hand. "And because something about your scars is bothering me." Jennifer looked at his hand like it might bite her. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. The walk back to her room took 15 minutes. Eric kept his arm around her waist, taking most of her weight, while she bit back sounds of pain with every step. The guards outside her door snapped to attention when they appeared, but Eric waved them off with a look that could have frozen blood. Inside, he guided her to the bed and pulled the medical kit from the side table, the one Dr. Reeves had left with instructions Eric had mostly ignored until now. Jennifer sat rigid, while he carefully lifted the nightgown enough to see the damage. 3 stitches torn, blood welling from the wound. "This is going to hurt." He cleaned the area with antiseptic, his movements precise, clinical. He'd sutured wounds before, his own, mostly, in the years before he'd trusted anyone enough to let them close. "Tell me about the scars." Jennifer's jaw clenched. "Which ones?" "Start with the oldest." She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, voice barely above a whisper, "I was 18. There was a man at the restaurant where I worked. Said he could get me a better job, hostessing at a club downtown. Good tips, nice clientele." Her laugh was bitter. "I was so stupid. I actually believed him." Eric's hands stilled. "Trafficking. They called it something else. Said I owed them for the training. The clothes. The apartment they put 6 of us in. Every time I tried to leave, the debt got bigger. Every time I fought back." She gestured to the scars on her arms. "Cigarette burns. Knife wounds. The systematic torture of someone being broken." "How long?" 3 years. Jennifer's voice cracked. 3 years before I got out the first time. They found me in Atlanta, 6 months later. Then again in Philadelphia. Last night was..." She stopped, swallowed hard. "Last night was the 4th time I've run." Eric finished cleaning the wound, his mind racing. Trafficking rings in his territory required permission. Tribute. A cut of the profits, flowing up to someone in his organization. If someone was operating this close to his estate without his knowledge. The man who cut you here. He touched the scar on her collarbone, the fresh one that had bled all over his suit. What did he look like? Tall. Maybe 6'2". Tattoo on his neck. A scorpion, I think. He had this ring he'd wear on his right hand. Used it too. She couldn't finish the sentence. Eric's blood turned to ice. The scorpion tattoo. The ring. He knew exactly one man who matched that description. A man he'd personally executed 4 years ago in a warehouse in Red Hook, put 3 bullets in his chest, and watched him bleed out on the concrete floor. Marcus Chen, his mother's former lieutenant, the one who'd been skimming profits and running side operations until Eric had taken over and cleaned house. Apparently Marcus Chen hadn't stayed dead. What is it? Jennifer was watching his face. You recognize him. Maybe. Eric reached for gauze, wrapped her ribs with hands that had gone steady through sheer force of will. The tattoo, the ring. If it's who I think it is. He stopped, met her eyes. You're not leaving this house. You said. I said if you wanted to leave, I'd drive you. That was before I knew what we're dealing with. He finished securing the bandage, pulled her nightgown back down. The man who did this to you shouldn't exist. I killed him 4 years ago. Which means either I'm losing my mind, or someone in my organization has been lying to me about a very significant body. Jennifer went pale. What does that mean? It means, Eric said quietly, my mother was right about one thing. You are dangerous. Not to me. To whoever's been operating under my nose, using my territory, my resources, my protection, to run their own private nightmare. He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the grounds his mother had cultivated with the same ruthless precision she'd applied to everything else. It means you're not damaged goods. You're evidence. Behind him, he heard Jennifer's breath hitch. Not with fear this time. With something else. Something that sounded almost like hope. What happens now? She asked. Eric turned back to face her. In the low light, with her dark hair tangled and her eyes still full of defiance despite the pain, she looked like something holy. Something worth burning the world down to protect. Now, he said, you tell me everything. Every face, every location, every detail you remember. And then I'm going to find out which one of my people has been playing God with other people's lives. Jennifer nodded slowly. And after that, I'm going to kill them. He said it the way other men discussed business meetings. The way I should have made sure they stayed dead the first time. The invitation arrived on ivory cardstock with Laura's personal watermark embossed in gold. The annual syndicate gala. Black tie required. Your attendance is mandatory. Eric held it between 2 fingers like it might contaminate him, reading the subtext his mother had written between every carefully chosen word. She was calling in the full court. Every family that mattered. Every alliance she'd spent decades cultivating. Every eye that could judge him for his choices. This wasn't a gala. This was a public execution disguised as a party. You're going to go. Jennifer stood in the doorway of his office, her ribs finally healed enough that she could move without wincing. 3 weeks since the stairwell. 3 weeks of late-night conversations where she'd mapped out names and locations, with the precision of someone who'd been cataloging escape routes her entire captivity. I don't have a choice. Eric set the invitation down. Refusing would be viewed as weakness. My mother would use it to justify removing me from active leadership. Then go alone. No. The word hung between them. Jennifer crossed her arms. A gesture he'd learned meant she was fighting her instinct to run. Eric, your mother is setting a trap. She'll have those 12 women there, probably with their families, probably with contracts already drawn up. This is her playing the long game. I know exactly what she's doing. He stood, moved around the desk, which is why I'm not going alone. You're coming with me. Jennifer's face went white. Are you insane? I can't. I don't belong at something like that. I don't even know which fork to use for. I don't care about forks. Eric moved closer, close enough to see the panic starting to bloom in her eyes. I care about making a statement. My mother wants to parade acceptable options in front of me, like I'm selecting a broodmare. I'm going to show her exactly what I think of acceptable. By bringing the charity case? The broken woman you picked up off the street? Jennifer's voice rose. That's not a statement, Eric. That's cruel. To me and to no one. He caught her wrist, gently, the way he'd learned to touch her. You think I'm ashamed of you. You think I'm using you to hurt my mother. You're wrong on both counts. Then what am I? You're the first real thing I've seen in 10 years. The words came out rougher than he'd intended. Every woman at that dinner table was a performance, a manufactured version of what someone decided I should want. You're the only person in this entire estate who doesn't lie to me. Jennifer stared at him. I'm also the only person who's been sold like livestock. Yes. He didn't flinch from it. Which means you understand exactly what my mother is trying to do to me, and why I won't let her. She pulled her wrist free, turned away. He could see her shoulders trembling. If I go with you, she'll destroy me. You know that. She'll find some way to. She'll try. Eric's voice went cold. She won't succeed. You can't promise that. No, he admitted. But I can promise that if she comes for you, I'll burn down everything she's built, including my own inheritance if necessary. Jennifer turned back to face him, searching his expression for the lie, the manipulation, the inevitable betrayal. Why? Why would you risk all of that for? Because 3 weeks ago you gave me the name of a dead man who's still operating in my territory. Because you've spent every night mapping out a trafficking network I didn't know existed. Because you survived something that was designed to break you, and you're still standing here fighting. He paused. And because when my mother looks at you, she sees damaged goods. I see someone who refused to stay broken. The silence stretched between them. Outside, a car pulled into the circular drive. More guests arriving for pre-gala meetings, more pieces on his mother's chessboard. I don't have anything to wear, Jennifer finally said. Yes, you do. The dress arrived 2 days later in a box that required 3 people to carry. Valentino. Custom-made based on measurements Eric had provided without Jennifer's knowledge. When she opened it, her hand started shaking. It was black silk, cut to hug every curve and flow like water with each movement. Long sleeves, high neck, elegant, sophisticated, expensive enough to belong at any gala in the world. But the back was completely open. From the nape of her neck to the base of her spine, the dress exposed everything. Every scar from cigarette burns, every knife wound, every mark left by hands and belts, and the systematic destruction of a human being. The designer had even adjusted the sleeve length to ensure the scars on her arms would be visible. I can't wear this. Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. Everyone will see. That's the point. Eric appeared behind her, his reflection joining hers in the full-length mirror. He was already dressed. Black Tom Ford tuxedo, white shirt, the same pristine elegance he always wore like armor. My mother wants to surround me with polished perfection. I'm going to show her what survival looks like. This isn't survival. This is... Jennifer's voice cracked. This is humiliation. You're asking me to stand in front of everyone who matters in your world and display every terrible thing that's ever happened to me like it's art. No. Eric's hands settled on her shoulders, careful not to touch the scars. I'm asking you to stand in front of everyone who matters in my world and show them that you're still here, still breathing, still whole, despite everything they tried to take from you. His eyes met hers in the mirror. Those scars don't make you weak, Jennifer. They make you terrifying. She wanted to argue, to refuse, to climb back into that safe, hidden space where no one could see the worst of what she'd survived. But something in his voice stopped her. Something that sounded almost like admiration. What if they laugh? She whispered. Let them. Eric's smile was cold. I'll remember every face, and they'll regret it. The gala was held in the ballroom of the plaza. 300 guests in designer gowns and tuxedos worth more than most people's cars. Laura had orchestrated it with her usual precision. Ice sculptures, champagne fountains, a string quartet playing Vivaldi. The 12 women from the dinner were positioned strategically around the room, each one a reminder of what Eric had rejected. They all turned when he entered. Eric Hirsch in his perfect black tuxedo, his expression carved from ice, his mother's controlled fury visible in the tightness around her mouth. And beside him, Jennifer Clayson in black Valentino with her scars on full display like a declaration of war. The room went silent. Someone's champagne glass hit the floor. The venture capitalist with the bone structure actually gasped. Laura's face went from white to red to a shade of rage that had no name. Eric placed his hand on the small of Jennifer's bare back, directly over the worst of the scars, and guided her into the room like she was royalty. Shall we dance? He asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Jennifer looked up at him, saw the challenge in his eyes, and realized this wasn't about her at all. This was about every person in this room who'd ever looked at someone broken and decided they were disposable. Yes, she said clearly. Let's. The waltz ended to scattered applause that sounded more like obligation than appreciation. Eric kept his hand on Jennifer's back as they moved through the crowd, feeling the way she held herself rigid, hyper-aware of every stare, every whispered comment that cut off when they passed. The venture capitalist turned away completely. The diplomat's niece pretended to be fascinated by an ice sculpture. Only the surgeon from Johns Hopkins had the courage to meet Jennifer's eyes, and what passed between them looked almost like respect. Laura held court near the champagne fountain, surrounded by the heads of the 5 families that comprised the syndicate's inner circle. She didn't acknowledge Eric's approach, Didn't even glance in Jennifer's direction. The calculated dismissal was more cutting than any verbal assault. Mrs. Castellano was just telling me about her grandson's graduation from Wharton, Laura said to no one in particular. Summa cum laude. Such an accomplished young man. The subtext was a sledgehammer. This is what matters. Education, reading. Not the charity project currently bleeding your reputation dry. I'm sure he'll make an excellent accountant, Eric replied evenly. Jennifer, would you like another drink? I think fresh air might be better. Her voice was steady, but he felt the tremor in her shoulders. The ballroom's heat and scrutiny were wearing her down. If you'll excuse me, she moved toward the terrace doors before he could offer to accompany her. Laura's smile sharpened. How thoughtful, his mother murmured. Giving her an escape route. You always were soft-hearted. Eric ignored the barb. Watched Jennifer slip through the French doors into the cool October night. She'd lasted longer than he'd expected. Longer than he'd had any right to ask her to endure. If you'll excuse me. He started to follow. Mr. Hirsch. The voice came from behind him. Deep. Familiar. A moment if you have time. Marcus Webb. Head of security for the past 8 years. Former military. The kind of man who could break someone's neck with his bare hands and never lose sleep over it. Eric had inherited him from his father. Kept him on because Webb was efficient, loyal, and asked no questions about the bodies that sometimes needed to disappear. Webb. Eric turned. Problem? Not exactly. Webb's expression was carefully neutral, but something in his eyes didn't match. Just wanted to confirm the security detail for your guest. Some of the men have been asking questions. About protocols. About whether she's under protection or surveillance. Protection. Eric's voice dropped into the register that made grown men flinch. Anyone who has a problem with that can bring it to me directly. Of course. Webb smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Though I have to say, sir, bringing her here tonight was unexpected. Some of the families are concerned about the optics. About what message it sends regarding our standards. Our standards. Eric repeated the words slowly. You mean my mother's standards? I mean the organization's standards. Webb's tone stayed professionally respectful, but there was an edge beneath it. Something that sounded almost like a warning. We've worked hard to build certain relationships. Maintain certain appearances. Your father understood the importance of. My father's been dead for 12 years. Eric stepped closer. Webb was 6'2", military trained, dangerous. Eric was 3 inches shorter and didn't care. I'm not interested in his methods. Or my mother's. If you have concerns about my decisions, submit them in writing. Otherwise, do your job and protect what I tell you to protect. Webb's jaw tightened. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Anger maybe, or calculation. Then the professional mask snapped back into place. Of course, sir. I only wanted to mention. He glanced toward the terrace doors. The girl's been through a lot. Trauma like that can make people unstable. Unpredictable. If she were to have some kind of episode, or make accusations that might embarrass the family, we should have contingencies in place. The words were smooth, reasonable, dressed up in concern and practical planning. But underneath, Eric heard the real message. She's a problem. Let us handle her. Contingencies. Eric's voice went very quiet, very cold. What kind of contingencies? Standard protocols. Medical evaluation. Supervised care. Perhaps a facility where she could receive proper treatment for her. Webb. Eric interrupted. Who suggested this conversation? Webb's expression flickered. Just for a second. Just long enough for Eric to see the truth written in the slight tightening around his eyes. The microscopic shift in his posture. I'm only looking out for the family's interests, sir. Are you? It wasn't a question. Eric studied the man who'd stood at his father's right hand, who'd helped bury bodies and eliminate threats, and maintain the pristine image of the Hirsch Empire. Tell me something. When was the last time you spoke with my mother? We coordinate security for all major events, as you know. That's not what I asked. The silence stretched. Around them, the gala continued, champagne flowing, conversation humming, the string quartet transitioning into something soft and melancholic. Laura was watching from across the room now, her attention focused on the exchange with the intensity of a sniper lining up a shot. Webb straightened his shoulders. Mrs. Cook is concerned about your welfare. About the position this woman has put you in. If there were a way to resolve the situation cleanly, without causing you additional distress. Stop talking. Eric's hand went to his inside pocket. Webb tensed. But Eric only pulled out his phone, tapped a number, and held it out. Call whoever you need to call. Tell them the quote contingencies are cancelled. Tell them if Jennifer Clayson disappears, has an episode, or ends up in any kind of facility, I will personally audit every financial record, every security report, and every communication that's passed through this organization in the last decade. Webb's face went pale. Sir, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly. Eric pocketed the phone. My mother offered you something. Money, probably. Protection, certainly. A promise that when she removes me from power, you'll keep your position. Maybe even get a promotion. He leaned in closer. Here's what she didn't tell you. I already know about the side operations. The warehouse in Red Hook. The trafficking network running through my territory without my authorization. And I know you've been taking a cut. The color drained from Webb's face completely. You want to make a move against Jennifer? Eric's smile was all teeth. Go ahead, but understand that the moment you do, every piece of evidence I've been collecting disappears into the hands of federal prosecutors. And I'll make sure they know exactly who to look at first. Webb opened his mouth, closed it. His hand drifted toward his jacket. Muscle memory, probably. Reaching for a weapon that couldn't help him now. Don't. Eric's voice dropped to a whisper. Not here. Not ever. You're done, Webb. The only question is whether you go quietly or whether I make an example of you. Behind them, Laura had started moving through the crowd. Coming to rescue her failing asset. Coming to smooth over whatever crack Eric had just driven into her carefully constructed plan. Eric turned away from Webb, walked toward the terrace doors, and left his head of security standing alone in a room full of witnesses. He found Jennifer on the terrace, leaning against the stone balustrade, her bare back to the ballroom. The scars were silver in the moonlight. Beautiful, in their way, proof of survival. We're leaving, he said quietly. She turned, saw his face, and didn't ask questions. Just took his offered arm and let him guide her back through the ballroom, past the staring faces and whispered judgments, past his mother's fury and Webb's barely concealed panic. They were halfway to the door when Jennifer spoke, her voice low enough that only he could hear. Your mother's going to try to kill me, isn't she? Yes, Eric said. She already has. The first bullet shattered the bedroom window at 3:18 in the morning. Eric was awake instantly, training overriding the brief fog of sleep. The second shot hit the headboard where his skull had been 2 seconds earlier, spraying splinters across the sheets. He rolled off the bed, reaching for the Glock he kept in the nightstand, his mind already calculating trajectories, entry points, how many seconds before. The third shot went wide, because Jennifer had thrown herself across the room and tackled the man climbing through the window. Jennifer, down! Eric brought the gun up but couldn't get a clean shot. She was grappling with an assassin twice her size, her bare hands clawing at his face while he tried to bring his weapon around. 3 weeks of healing, and she was still moving like someone who'd learned to fight for her life in rooms with no exits. The assassin backhanded her. She went down hard, blood spraying from her split lip. Eric fired twice. The man dropped, red blooming across his tactical vest in 2 tight clusters. Center mass, the way his father had taught him before the funeral. Stay down, Eric barked, but Jennifer was already moving, scrambling toward the door. There's more, she gasped. I heard them in the hallway. 3, maybe 4. The door exploded inward. 2 men in black tactical gear, suppressors on their weapons, moving with military precision. Eric fired before they cleared the threshold, dropping the first one. The second got a shot off that burned past Eric's ear and punched into the wall behind him. He was adjusting his aim when Jennifer appeared from his blind spot with a marble bookend and brought it down on the man's skull with enough force to crack bone. The assassin crumpled. Jennifer stood over him, breathing hard, the bookend still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. How many? Eric was already moving toward the hallway, gun raised. I don't know. I woke up when I heard glass breaking in your room. Saw them coming up the stairs. She followed him to the doorway, pressing against the wall. Blood dripped from her lip onto her white nightgown. Where are your guards? Dead or bought? Eric's jaw clenched. Webb. This was Webb's work, had to be. The head of security, who controlled shift rotations and access codes, and knew exactly which men could be bribed or threatened into standing down. Can you shoot? I can learn fast. He pulled the backup piece from his ankle holster, a compact Sig Sauer, and pressed it into her hands. Safety's off. Point and squeeze. Don't hesitate. Jennifer took the gun like it might bite her. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were clear. Focused. The same expression she'd had when she was mapping out the trafficking network, cataloging every face and location with the precision of someone who understood that details meant survival. Stay behind me, Eric said. No. She moved to his left side, covering the opposite angle. You have a blind spot. I watched you at the range last week. Your left peripheral is weak. You overcompensate. He stared at her. How do you? I pay attention. Jennifer's voice was steady, despite the tremor in her hands. You taught me to map exits. I mapped you instead. There was no time to process that. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, professional. At least 2 more coming up, maybe 3. Eric calculated the angles, the distance to the main staircase, the alternative routes through the house. They were exposed here, vulnerable. If they stayed in the hallway, the library, Jennifer said quietly, reading his expression. Second door on the left. Only one entrance. Solid oak door, bookshelf we can use for cover, and a panic room in the back if we need it. Eric looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd been broken and sold and hunted, who was supposed to be the victim he protected, and who was now covering his weak side with a gun she'd never fired, and a tactical analysis she'd pieced together from watching him live his life. Move, he said. They ran. The library door was solid, reinforced, installed by his father during a paranoid phase in the 90s. Eric slammed it shut and threw the deadbolt just as footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Jennifer was already moving the heavy leather armchair in front of it, creating a barricade that might buy them 30 seconds. The panic room, Eric said, heading toward the false bookshelf at the back of the library. No. Jennifer grabbed his arm. That's what they want. Get us trapped in a sealed room, pumping gas, or just wait us out. We need the high ground and multiple exits. There are no multiple exits from the balcony. She pointed to the French doors overlooking the gardens. 10-foot drop to the hedge maze. I've mapped every path. We can lose them in there and circle back to the garage. Eric's mind raced. She was right. The panic room was a death trap if they controlled the estate. But the hedge maze, his mother's pride and joy, installed at astronomical cost, was a labyrinth. Even he got turned around in there. You've memorized it? He asked. I memorized everything. Jennifer moved to the French doors, checked the lock. I told you. I pay attention. The library door shuddered under an impact. They were using something heavy, a battering ram probably. The deadbolt would hold for maybe 3 more hits. Eric made the decision in under a second. Grabbed Jennifer's hand and pulled her toward the balcony. They were through the French doors and over the railing when the library door finally gave way, splintering inward with a crash that echoed through the estate. They hit the hedges hard. Jennifer rolled with the impact, came up running. Eric followed, his expensive pajama pants snagging on branches while she navigated the maze like she'd been born in it. Left turn. Right. Straight for 20 paces. Another left. Behind them shouts. Flashlight beams, cutting through the darkness. At least 4 men, maybe more, spreading out to cover the exits. This way. Jennifer pulled him down a narrow passage he didn't even know existed. The hedges were 10 feet tall here, so thick they blocked out the moonlight. She moved through the darkness with absolute certainty, one hand trailing the hedge wall, counting steps under her breath. How? Eric started. I walked it every day. Her voice was barely a whisper. While you were in meetings. While your mother was hosting her luncheons. While everyone assumed I was too broken to be useful. She pulled him around a sharp corner. I was mapping escape routes. Just like you taught me. They emerged at the back of the maze, near the old carriage house that Eric had converted into a garage. The building was dark, no guards visible, which meant either they were dead or they'd abandoned their posts. Jennifer checked the angles, then pulled Eric toward the side entrance, not the main door, but a service entrance hidden behind decorative lattice. You've thought of everything, Eric said quietly. No. She turned to face him, blood still dried on her chin, dirt smeared across her nightgown, the gun still clutched in her shaking hands. I've survived everything. There's a difference. The sound of running footsteps reached them from the maze. Multiple sets. Closing in fast. Eric pulled out his phone, hoping his emergency line was still secure, hoping someone in his organization hadn't been bought by Webb and his mother's money. The call connected on the first ring. Sir? Marcus Torres. His second in command. The one man Eric had kept deliberately isolated from Webb's chain of command. The estate is compromised, Eric said quietly. Multiple hostiles. Webb is the leak. I need a full security team at my location in 10 minutes. Copy that. We're already en route. Your alarm triggered automatically when the window broke. Should be there in 6 minutes. Eric felt something in his chest unclench. How did... The girl. Torres's voice was grim. She called me 3 hours ago. Said she had a bad feeling about tonight. Asked me to position teams outside your security perimeter without telling anyone. Including you. Eric's eyes cut to Jennifer. She was watching the hedge maze entrance, the gun raised, her finger resting along the trigger guard with textbook precision, like someone who learned to shoot somewhere that wasn't a firing range. Somewhere that mattered. She told you to position teams, he said slowly. Yes, sir. Said you'd think she was paranoid. Said to do it anyway. A pause. She was right. The first assassin emerged from the maze. Jennifer fired 3 times. 2 shots went wide, but the third caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Not a kill shot, but enough. Eric finished it with 2 more to center mass. 2 more men appeared. Eric and Jennifer fired together, covering different angles, forcing them to retreat back into the hedge maze. Then headlights cut through the darkness. 3 black SUVs roaring up the service road, Men in tactical gear pouring out before the vehicles even stopped. Torres's team. Clean. Loyal. Armed for war. The firefight lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, 6 bodies lay scattered across the garden, another 3 in the hedge maze, 2 more in the library. Webb was found in the security office with a bullet in his head, self-inflicted probably, when he'd realized his plan had failed. Eric sat on the carriage house steps while medics checked Jennifer's injuries and Torres coordinated cleanup. The sun was starting to rise, painting his mother's perfect hedges gold and red, like the whole estate was bleeding. Jennifer finished with the medics and sat down beside him. Her lip had been butterflied shut, her hands wrapped in gauze where the bookend had split her palms open. She still held herself like someone ready to run at the first sign of danger. "You called Torres," Eric said quietly. "I told you. I pay attention." She stared at the bodies being loaded into black bags. "Your mother has been making calls. Webb has been too confident. The guards have been watching me differently. I grew up reading rooms for threats. I know what it looks like when someone's planning to kill you. You saved my life. You saved mine first." Jennifer's voice was flat. Exhausted. "I figured we were even." Eric looked at her. This woman who was supposed to be broken, who'd survived trafficking and torture and his mother's venom, and had still found a way to position backup teams and memorize escape routes and cover his blind spots. Who'd gone from victim to partner, somewhere between the stairwell and the ballroom, and the hedge maze painted in blood. "We're not even," he said quietly. "Not even close." Jennifer met his eyes. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. The acknowledgement that they'd both been fighting their own wars until tonight, when their wars had finally converged. "What happens now?" she asked. Eric stood, offered his hand. She took it without hesitation this time. "Now," he said, "we deal with my mother." They found sanctuary in the East Wing guest house, the only building on the estate that hadn't been touched by the night's violence. Torres had cleared it personally, posted guards at every entrance, and left them with the kind of privacy that felt almost sacred after hours of gunfire and interrogations and cleaning blood off marble floors. Eric sat on the edge of the bed, his white undershirt ruined with dirt and gunpowder residue, watching Jennifer pace the length of the room like a caged animal that had forgotten how to stop moving. "You should sit," he said quietly. "The medic said your ribs." "My ribs are fine." She pressed her bandaged palms against the window, staring out at the gardens where body bags were still being loaded into unmarked vans. 6 dead, 2 in critical condition. Your head of security put a bullet in his own head rather than face you. Her voice cracked. "This is my fault." "No." Eric stood. "This is Webb's fault. And my mother's. They made the choice to. They made the choice because of me." Jennifer spun to face him, and for the first time since the window shattered, he saw her walls crumbling. "If you hadn't brought me here, if you'd just let me bleed out at that gate like I was supposed to, none of this would have happened. Those men would still be alive. Your estate wouldn't look like a war zone. Your mother wouldn't be. My mother has been orchestrating violence for 40 years. Eric's voice cut through her spiral like a blade. "The only difference is tonight she aimed it at someone I refused to give up." Jennifer flinched. "You barely know me." "I know enough." He moved closer, slowly, giving her space to retreat if she needed it. "I know you memorized escape routes while pretending to be helpless. I know you positioned backup security without my knowledge because you trusted your instincts over my arrogance. I know you threw yourself at an armed assassin to save my life when you could have run." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the tremor in her shoulders, far enough that she didn't feel trapped. "I know you're the first person in a decade who hasn't lied to me about who they are. You don't know anything about who I am." Jennifer's laugh was broken, bitter. "I'm someone who got sold because I was too stupid to see the trap. Someone who spent 3 years on her knees because she wasn't strong enough to fight back. Someone who carries scars like a fucking roadmap to every mistake I've ever made. You survived. Survival isn't heroic, Eric. It's just..." Her voice cracked completely. "It's just not dying when you're supposed to. It's making yourself small enough that maybe they'll forget you're there. It's learning which men you can manipulate and which ones will kill you if you try. It's becoming exactly the kind of broken thing your mother thinks I am." The words hung in the air between them, raw, honest. The kind of truth that drew blood. Eric closed the distance. Jennifer's hands came up instinctively, defensive, protecting her face, and he caught her wrists gently, carefully, the way he'd learned to touch her over the past month, like she was made of glass and steel in equal measure. "Look at me," he said quietly. She did. Her eyes were wet, fury and shame and exhaustion warring across her expression. "My father was murdered when I was 19, Eric said. Shot in the head by a man he trusted. A man he'd mentored. A man my mother had positioned specifically to betray him when the time was right." Jennifer's breath hitched, but he kept going. She told me afterward that it was necessary, that my father had gotten soft, sentimental, that he'd been making decisions based on loyalty instead of profit, and the organization couldn't afford that kind of weakness. Eric. I buried him on a Tuesday. She hosted a board meeting on Wednesday. By Friday, she'd restructured the entire leadership and eliminated anyone who might have questioned how convenient the timing was. His grip on Jennifer's wrists tightened fractionally. I was 19 years old, and I let her do it. Because I didn't know how to stop her. Because I thought that was what strength looked like. Cutting out the soft parts until there's nothing left but efficiency. Jennifer was staring at him now, really seeing him. Seeing past the white suits and cold precision to the parts he'd buried so deep, he'd almost forgotten they existed. She spent the next 12 years teaching me to be exactly like her, Eric continued, calculated, strategic, emotionally detached. Every woman she paraded in front of me was a transaction. Every business deal was a power play. Every relationship was leverage. He let go of her wrists, his hands sliding up to frame her face. Then you fell through my door covered in blood and scars and refused to perform for anyone, and I realized I'd spent over a decade becoming someone I fucking hate. You're not. Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. You're not like her. I was. The admission tasted like copper. I would have been. Another 5 years and I would have been exactly what she wanted. A perfect replica of her cold, calculating legacy. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, wiping away a tear she probably didn't know she'd shed. You stopped that. Not by trying to fix me. By refusing to pretend you weren't broken. Jennifer's hands came up to cover his. Her bandaged palms were rough against his skin. She tried to have me killed. I know. She'll try again. I know. Eric, she's your mother. She built everything you have. If you go to war with her, then I go to war. His voice was steady. Absolute. I don't care about the empire. I don't care about the legacy. I don't care about 40 years of careful alliances and political maneuvering. She aimed assassins at you while you were sleeping in my home, under my protection. And that is the only calculation that matters. Jennifer was crying now. Really crying. The kind of tears that came from somewhere deeper than fear or pain. You'll lose everything. No. Eric leaned his forehead against hers, feeling her breath mix with his, feeling the tremor in her body slowly start to ease. I'll lose her version of everything. The pristine performance. The acceptable choices. The marriage to someone who looks good in photographs and doesn't ask inconvenient questions. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. I'm done performing, Jennifer. I'm done letting her curate my life like it's a museum exhibit. If burning down her legacy is what it takes to keep you alive, then I'll light the match myself. Why? The word was barely a sound. Why would you do that for someone like me? Because when I look at you, I don't see damaged goods. Eric's voice dropped to something raw, something he'd never let anyone hear before. I see someone who survived the worst thing I can imagine and still found a way to save me from a blind spot. I see someone who maps escape routes and covers weak flanks and refuses to die quietly. His hands tightened on her face. I see the only real thing in my entire manufactured world. Jennifer's eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the inevitable betrayal that always came when someone said they cared. She didn't find it. I'm scared, she whispered. Good. Eric's smile was grim. So am I. But I'd rather be scared and real than safe and empty. The sun was fully up now, painting the guest house in gold. Outside, Torres was coordinating cleanup and damage control. Inside, two people who'd spent their lives learning how to survive in different hells finally stopped running. Jennifer kissed him first. A desperate, clumsy thing that tasted like blood and salt, and something that might have been hope. Eric kissed her back like she was the only true thing he'd ever touched, his hands sliding into her hair, pulling her closer, until there was no space left between broken and whole, between victim and protector, between performance and truth. When they finally broke apart, Jennifer pressed her forehead against his chest. What do we do now? Eric held her tighter. Now we finish what Webb started. We find everyone my mother has in her pocket. We expose the trafficking network. We dismantle every piece of her empire that's built on selling people like you. He felt her breath hitch against his throat. And then I remove her from power. She won't go quietly. No, he agreed. She won't. Jennifer pulled back, met his eyes, and he saw something fierce burning behind the fear. Good. I'm tired of quiet. The emergency board meeting was called for 7 p.m. in the main conference room, the same mahogany table where Laura had once arranged 12 perfect women like chess pieces. Eric arrived at 6:58 in a black suit that looked like morning attire. Jennifer walked beside him in midnight blue silk, another custom piece, high-necked and long-sleeved, elegant enough to belong but cut to reveal the scars on her collarbone like a deliberate statement. Torres flanked them with 4 armed men, a visible reminder that the estate security now answered to someone new. Laura was already seated at the head of the table, her pearls catching the chandelier light, her posture a weapon of controlled fury. The 5 family heads sat in their usual positions: Castellano, Way, Morrison, DeLuca, and Kozlov, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. These were the pillars of the syndicate, the ones who'd built empires alongside Laura Cook and expected loyalty in return. "You're late," Laura said coldly, "and you've brought a guest to a closed meeting. How inappropriate." "Jennifer stays." Eric took the seat directly across from his mother, positioning himself as opposition rather than subordinate. "Since this concerns her directly, this concerns the stability of our organization." Laura's hands folded on the table, fingers interlocked. "Which you've been actively undermining for the past month with your," she gestured vaguely at Jennifer, "project." "Her name is Jennifer Clayson." Eric's voice cut like a blade. "And she's not a project. She's the reason we discovered a trafficking operation running through our territory for the past 4 years without authorization." The temperature in the room dropped. Castellano leaned forward, his thick eyebrows drawing together. "What trafficking operation?" "The one Marcus Chen has been operating since his supposed death." Eric pulled a folder from his briefcase, slid it across the table. "The one that's been moving women through 3 of our ports, using our protection, and paying tribute to exactly 1 person in this room." Laura's expression didn't flicker. "That's absurd. Chen is dead. You killed him yourself." "I killed someone." Eric opened his own copy of the folder. "Torres has spent the past week pulling surveillance footage, financial records, and witness testimony. Would you like to know what we found?" Silence, heavy and dangerous. Morrison exchanged a glance with Way. DeLuca's hand drifted toward his jacket pocket. Nervous habit, reaching for cigarettes he'd quit 5 years ago. "The man I executed in Red Hook wasn't Marcus Chen," Eric continued. "He was a decoy. Someone with the right build and the right tattoos, positioned to take the fall while Chen disappeared into witness protection, which someone in our organization arranged." He pulled out a photo. Chen alive and well, photographed outside a warehouse in Newark 3 weeks ago. Someone who needed Chen's operation to continue because they were taking 40% off the top. Laura's jaw tightened. "Just fractionally. Just enough. You're suggesting I protected a traitor?" Her voice could have frozen nitrogen. "That I orchestrated the death of an innocent man and let the real criminal walk free? Based on what? The word of a traumatized woman with obvious credibility issues? Based on bank records?" Torres stepped forward, placed another folder on the table. "Offshore accounts in the Caymans. 12 wire transfers over 4 years, each one corresponding to a shipment of women through our ports. All traced back to shell companies registered under your maiden name." The room erupted. Castellano was on his feet. Wee's face had gone pale. Morrison's hand actually reached his gun before Torres's men shifted their stances, a subtle reminder of who controlled the violence now. "This is a coup," Laura said quietly. "Dangerously. You're using forged documents and a convenient witness to remove me from power. Everything I've built, everything your father and I created together, everything you built on the backs of trafficked women." Jennifer spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite the fury radiating from Laura's direction. "Girls who were promised jobs and got chains instead. Women who were beaten and branded and sold like livestock while you took your cut and pretended your empire was clean." Laura's eyes fixed on Jennifer like a snake, selecting which bone to break first. "You have no right to speak here. You're not family. You're not syndicate. You're a pet my son picked up in a moment of weakness. She's a survivor of an operation you enabled." Eric's voice cracked like a whip. "And she has more right to sit at this table than you do." "I built this table." Laura was on her feet now, both hands flat against the mahogany, her carefully constructed control finally fracturing. "I spent 40 years turning this organization from a street gang into an empire. I made the hard choices. I cut out the weakness. I did what was necessary. You sold women." Eric stood to match her. "You partnered with Marcus Chen, faked his death to protect your investment. And when Jennifer escaped and threatened to expose the whole operation, you sent assassins into my home to eliminate the evidence." "I sent assassins to eliminate a threat." Laura's mask shattered completely. "A broken, traumatized girl who was going to destroy everything because you couldn't see past your pathological need to save people who don't want to be saved. Your father had the same weakness. It got him killed. I wasn't about to let it get you killed too." The confession hung in the air like cordite. Castellano sank back into his chair. Way removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly. Morrison's hand finally found those phantom cigarettes. DeLuca and Kozlov exchanged a look that said they'd already made their calculations and were waiting to see which way the power shifted. "You admit it," Eric said quietly. "On record, in front of witnesses." Laura's face went from red to white. "I admit that I protect this family, that I make the decisions no one else has the stomach for, that I..." You're done. Eric's voice was flat. Final. Effective immediately. You're removed from all operational decisions. Your accounts are frozen. Your access to syndicate resources is revoked. Torres will escort you from the estate within the hour. You can't. Laura looked around the table, searching for allies. Castellano. Wait, you can't let him do this. I've served this organization longer than he's been alive. My judgment. My experience. Your judgment got 6 men killed 3 nights ago, Castellano said heavily. Your experience includes enabling a trafficking ring none of us knew existed. If Eric wants you out, I'm not standing in his way. Wei nodded. Morrison shrugged. DeLuca and Kozlov stayed silent, which was answer enough. Laura's hands curled into fists. This is a mistake. Without me, this organization will fall apart. You're too soft, Eric. Too sentimental. You'll make choices based on emotion instead of strategy, and it will destroy everything. Then let it burn. Eric moved around the table until he stood directly in front of his mother. I'd rather rule ashes built on truth than an empire built on selling human beings. For a long moment, Laura simply stared at him. Her son. The legacy she'd spent 2 decades sculpting into her perfect replica. Then her eyes cut to Jennifer, still seated, still composed, wearing her scars like armor. You'll regret this, Laura whispered. When the other families see weakness, when they test your boundaries, when you realize that sentiment doesn't pay for security, or buy loyalty, or keep the sharks from circling, you'll understand why I made the choices I did. Maybe, Eric said quietly, but I'll make them as myself, not as your puppet. Torres stepped forward. Mrs. Cook, it's time. Laura straightened her jacket, adjusted her pearls, and walked toward the door with the same rigid dignity she'd carried her entire life. At the threshold, she paused. Looked back. She'll destroy you, Laura said. Not to Eric. To Jennifer. The moment you stop being useful, the moment you become a liability, he'll make the same calculation I did, and you'll find yourself alone again with nothing but your scars and your survival instincts. Jennifer stood, walked to the head of the table where Laura had presided for 40 years, placed both hands on the mahogany, her scarred fingers splayed wide, claiming the space. The difference, Jennifer said quietly, is that I already know what the bottom looks like. I've already survived being sold and broken and discarded. Your threats don't work on someone who's already lived through your worst nightmare. She leaned forward. But you've spent your entire life building walls between yourself and consequences. Let's see how you survive without them. Laura's face contorted with rage. For a moment she looked like she might actually lunge across the room. Then Torres's hand settled on her elbow, not rough, but firm, and guided her through the door. The sound of her heels echoed down the marble hallway. Then silence. Eric moved to stand beside Jennifer at the head of the table. The 5 family heads watched with expressions ranging from shock to calculation to something that might have been respect. Gentlemen, Eric said. Let me introduce Jennifer Clayson. She'll be overseeing all port operations and security protocols moving forward. Anyone with objections can direct them to me. Castellano studied Jennifer for a long moment. The girl who took down Webb's hit squad in a nightgown. The woman, Jennifer corrected quietly, who survived 4 years of hell in your territory while you pretended not to notice. His expression flickered. Fair point. He extended his hand across the table. Welcome to the table, Miss Clayson. She took it. Firm grip. Eye contact. The handshake of someone who'd learned that showing weakness was a death sentence. One by one, the others followed. Wei, Morrison, DeLuca, Kozlov, each one acknowledging that something fundamental had shifted. That the perfect, polished empire Laura had built was being dismantled by a woman whose scars told a story of exactly what that perfection had cost. When the meeting finally ended and the room emptied, Eric and Jennifer stood alone at the head of the table. The chandelier cast fractured light across the mahogany, illuminating the space where his mother had once sat in judgment. Are you ready for this? Eric asked quietly. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Other families will test us. Try to exploit what they see as weakness. You'll be a target. I've always been a target. Jennifer turned to face him. In the chandelier light, her scars seemed to glow. Battle wounds worn like a crown. The difference is now I'm a target with an empire behind me, and a partner who won't sell me the moment it's convenient. Eric pulled her closer, his hand settling in the small of her back where the dress exposed the worst of the damage. Partners, he agreed. In war and everything else. Jennifer kissed him there in the empty conference room, claiming her space at the head of a table built on blood and secrets, and 40 years of his mother's careful cruelty. When they finally broke apart, she smiled, sharp and dangerous and unapologetically scarred. Let them come, she said. I'm done running. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Share your thoughts in the comments and inspire others.